Welcome to Canadian Music in the 80s and 90s A. I've got a very special guest. You know him as a talk show host and a comedian, and a very good one. He's here to talk about music, which he promoted a lot in the 90s, especially Canadian music. And he's going to talk a little bit about a trip to Ukraine that he made, which I'm really looking forward to. Welcome, Mike Bullard.
How you doing, Alan? Who nobody can see.
Yeah.
I love these interviews where you fling questions at me from behind the camera, but you don't have enough faith to be on your own show. That always cracks me up.
You've got the TV face, that's why.
Yeah, I got a TV face, all right.
Anyway.
By the way, if there's two things I don't know about, it's sports and music. You can tell me a band was on my show, and I'll go, really, were they? Because music was not my forte, and neither was sports. I told you this story earlier. Scott Moore called me down to Rogers when they made all the changes at Hockey Night in Canada, and they wanted me to think about taking that spot that Strombo eventually took on Hockey Night in Canada. So I sat in the interview and I turned to them after about 5 minutes and said, so how much do I have to know about hockey? And the guy behind the table goes, everything? I go, yeah. You know what? I'm not your guy. I go to a hockey game once a year that my friend drags me to. I used to get emails on my show accusing me of being a fucking communist because I had NHL players on and didn't really care. So I think you better go with somebody else. So Strombo owes me a big thank you, although he didn't last that long.
Right.
You know.
Well, I guess I want to go back and how did you ever get involved in being a comedian and a host? Because I know you do a lot of hosting jobs too. Like what?
Always emceed, because I took a page from David Letterman's book. Mm-hmm. And people don't know this, but David Letterman never headlined. He always emceed because he was rehearsing for a talk show. And if you're going to have a late night talk show, you better MC because it's all spontaneity. It's not prepared material. And if you're going to have a late night talk show, you better be prepared to be spontaneous or you're going to be a bust. And that is the key to hosting a late night talk show. So, and the other key to it is to make a guest look good. You'll look great.
So how long were you doing like the emceeing and doing kind of the comedy thing before you got a chance at a show?
I used to write for my brother in the early 80s. He and Norm Macdonald left for LA and eventually became the writers on Roseanne. Tom Arnold hired them. And then they shot off into the stratosphere from there. But I started doing it in 88 when my brother left. And I got promoted off amateur night pretty quickly. And I started emceeing in 89 because the owner of the Mississauga Club would sneak me in there behind the head office's back. Whenever they had an act who didn't do his time, they would quickly phone me and say, can you come over and MC the next show? So I would come and MC it. And Ed Smeal, who's my agent today, no longer works for Yuck Yucks, but he was the head agent at Yuck Yucks. He found out he wanted to fire me, and then one night, Mark Breslin was there on Saturday night when they stuck me into MC and they didn't know he was there. Mark, the owner of Yuck Yucks. So he went back to the office and said, well, wait a second. Why don't we just make him the MC? And that's how it happened.
And how did you get into the TV business? How did you get...
That's a good one. I should be accused or convicted of embezzlement from CBC because CBC gave me a comic special and they said to me, you do 20 minutes of stand-up and we need 20 minutes of you doing something else. So I said, why don't I do a parody of a late night talk show? So CBC, being what CBC is, built a $75,000 set for a parody of a talk show. And I got, they said, well, who do you want on the show? I said, Bob McDonald from Quirks and Quarks and Peter Mansbridge, your national news anchor. They said, oh, well, are you sure? I said, oh yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want. So I got a late night TV show pilot out of CBC by screwing them around and making out like it was going to be a parody, and it wasn't a parody at all. I did 2 funny interviews with Bob McDonald and Peter Mansbridge, and Peter Mansbridge and I laughed about it for years after. And I got it to CTV. The Bassett family owned CTV at the time. Ken Shaw asked me to MC a charity golf tournament for him. He was the #1 local news anchor in Toronto. He worked at CFTO, which was owned by the Bassets. Doug was there. Doug was there, the owner of the network, the sole owner of the network, son of the founder. I killed at the golf tournament. I remember because there was a funeral director there. I said, "What do you do?" He said, "Oh, I own a funeral home." I said, "I'm sorry, I didn't notice the 5 watches." In other words, stealing watches from bodies. Doug fell off his chair laughing, and it was like that all night. Doug walked over to me after, he goes, "Listen, we're going to be applying for some specialty channels, and one of them's going to be the Comedy Channel. Just tell me what you want, you'll get it." I said, "I want a late night talk show." He said, "What do you want?" I said, "I want a late night talk show. I want it to be on every night." Done. That's how it happened.
I recall you started doing the show at Wayne Gretzky's at first.
Which I wish I'd been at forever. It was not my idea to buy the Masonic Temple. It was not my idea to move in there. We had 99 seats, just like Gretzky's number, and we were turning 100 people away a night. I wanted to stay in Gretzky's forever, but CTV wanted to do this big deal where they bought the Masonic Temple, turned it into a studio, had 5 floors of shows going on. So I really had no say over that. But, I wound up working in the end. I mean, I was on for 8 years. And I will hold that record forever. There's never going to be another late night Canadian talk show like the kind I did.
And you did it with like a skeleton staff compared to what a Letterman might have had.
3 writers compared to their 21. Way more spontaneity. I owe Orrin Isaacs a debt of gratitude, and he owes one to me. He was my band leader. Mm-hmm. He was more than a band leader. He was my co-host. And I did the hiring and the writing end. They were my best friends from comedy: Lawrence Morgenstern, Rob Ross, Greg Eckler, and Sean Tweedy. Sean Tweedy was the comedy producer and in charge of the writers.
And he did a Haywire video, by the way.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. And then he did the warm-up show. Mm-hmm. And anybody I hired, we never had a problem with. Okay? The problem in TV in this country is Canadian producers. And I'm not going to go into the details because I don't want to get my ass sued off.
Yeah.
But they are the problem in Canadian television. Although what Canadian television is left? Rogers and Bell Media, I don't mind saying this on here, have ruined everything. Everything. Everything they touch, turns to shit.
Yeah.
And it's sad what they've done. And it's sad that ACTRA, our union, stood by and let these things happen. They have zero clout. You pay your dues. What do you get out of it? Dental. That's basically what you get out of ACTRA. And I don't care if they see this and they're offended. I've told them for years. They've done very little to help the community. But they take and take and take when you're successful. They take off your check.
Yeah. Well,
I'm doing another show. I'm shooting a pilot for APTN. They're the only game in town now that actually does something, and I put an Aboriginal aspect in it so I could get it on there. And that's who I'm going to go with, and I'm not doing anything anymore that I don't own. Because if you don't own it, you don't have 100% control over it.
Right.
And if you don't have 100% control over it, you're not going to be happy, especially in this day and age. Sorry, that was my phone.
That's okay.
See, I'm still employable. That's somebody looking for me for a job out.
As you should be.
Yeah.
No, the reason I did want to talk to you is because your show really did a lot for Canadian entertainment.
I'm always happy to hear that.
Not just music. You did a lot for Canadian comedians. You did a lot for television.
Canadian comics got $1,000 an appearance. I had to fight with ACTRA over it. Had to fight with CTV and the producers over it. Because the actors were there to promote a movie or a TV show they were being paid for. The bands were there to promote an album which they were going to make money off of. I said, what are the comics here for? To burn 6 minutes of material and promo an appearance at Yuck Yucks. I said, we're paying the comics. and they fought me tooth and nail on it, but I wouldn't hear it. I wouldn't hear of it. And Derek Edwards wound up being pretty well known. And every time a comic was on the show, if they said what club they were in Yuck Yucks that weekend, it was sold out. And that was my goal. My goal was to make people realize that comedians are not stupid. You know, I don't understand why we revere people like Bill Maher in the U.S. And we know he's a stand-up comic, but we also know he's a smart guy. Why do people not realize that comics are the smartest guys in the room? I don't get it. Why don't the networks get it? Why don't the radio people get it? Why don't they understand that? Now, there's been a lot of drug and alcohol issues, which have prevented people from rising to that. But when I got the late night talk show, I did an interview with a guy, and I said, I got news for you. I'm not Ralph Ben-Merghi, and I'm not Peter Zowski. You don't reinvent the wheel. You take a comic who's got years of experience in a club, and you make that person, man or woman, the host of a late night talk show. What is it you people don't get? You know, because they perfected it in the U.S. in the 50s and 60s.
Right.
Just use the same formula.
And it worked. Like, because I remember hearing a lot of people saying a Canadian late night talk show would never work, and you proved them all wrong.
Yeah, I did, because I had no government money. Not a penny of taxpayer money was used on my show. It was all based on ratings. And I was on a budget of 29 grand. I was pulling in 65,000 a night for CTV and profits. And that was all commercials. You know. And Toronto Life wanted to do a story that made me look bad. When they found out that 3 nights a week our ratings were higher than Letterman and Leno's, instead of being a cover story, it went to a little banner at the top.
Yeah.
You won't believe who's beating Leno and Letterman. It made Toronto Life so sad, that it had to be a positive story.
Well, the thing I remember is I used to like, I always really liked the way your audience coordinators would really, if someone really wanted to get in the audience at your show, they would help you do that, because I loved going down to see bands I liked.
Right.
When I knew they were going to be on your show, because you promoted them, and it was a lot, mostly Canadian bands, I think. A lot of them were.
To me, we had 2 kids who did that job, and to me, they had the most important job.
Yeah.
To me, the most important job was not booking guests. To me, the most important job was getting the right audience in those seats. Now, had they mic'd the audience, it would have been fantastic, but they didn't.
Yeah.
You know, people would watch the show at home and laugh and go, why isn't the audience laughing like I'm laughing? Well, guess what? They were. It went up and out.
Yeah.
That place was never designed as a TV studio. But those kids had an important job, and they busted their asses every day to make sure that studio was full. Thursday and Friday, never a problem. You haven't lived here. Letterman used to say it too. You'll never see a best of on a Tuesday night show.
Yeah.
The best ofs are always Thursday and Friday shows because of the audience. The audience is so important, you know, and that was what made it fun too. The audience was what made it fun for me. When I had a great audience, I went completely off script for the whole show. For me, that was the most fun I could ever have.
But that was your thing. You were very good at thinking like off of your head.
Yeah, there's a clip going around now. The night I did the Casey House benefit for AIDS. I did it like 20 years ago, and now this clip's going all over the internet this week, and it's 6 minutes long. But I'm pretty proud of it because I made it all up as I went along, and the happiest I've ever been is when I make it all up as I go along. I'm back doing stand-up big time now. I'm doing theaters and clubs, and nothing thrills me more than coming out and being able to be spontaneous for an hour with a crowd of 300 to 400 people who are loving every minute of it. It's amazing.
Are you going across Canada with some of your work now?
The Ukrainian government wants me to go across Canada and do theaters and make it a combination, pay me and fundraise for them. So we'll see what they do with it. Crime Stoppers, because I'm an ex-cop, wants myself and Rick Lemieux, another great Canadian comic who just retired as a police officer, to do a cross-country tour for Crime Stoppers.
Really?
So I think that might be a lot of fun.
Yeah, it would be.
And of course, there's Yuck Yucks. I mean, I'm with them every weekend. And Ed Smeals is my primary agent. I get my one-nighters all go through Ed. So I'm busy all the time now, and I couldn't be happier. Plus, I got a book deal on what happened in the Ukraine, and I'm working with a fabulous author, Margaret Dinsdale. I tape stuff every night and send it to her on email, and she starts writing in the morning. It's the best way to do it. You know, it's going to be as told to, and that's the way I want to do it anyway.
No, let's jump to the Ukraine. How did you get that opportunity to go over to the Ukraine?
James Chalice is a Canadian war hero, and he's retired from the Canadian military. And he's been over there since the war started. He's only come home twice. He's a friend of mine. And he invited me to a meeting with the Ukrainian Canadian Congress. And they didn't put it on the screen because it was too graphic for the public to see, but he showed me a video of a mass grave with women and children. And when I saw it, I said, I don't care what they want me to do, I'm going there. I'm going. Now, I covered 5,000 kilometers in 4 months, brought food and medicine to 25,000 people, and I think the happiest moment for me was Christmas Day, even though I was away from everybody I loved. And I got to buy presents for 250 kids thanks to Canadian donors and me. And every kid got every single thing they wanted on the list in 10 villages. And I'm telling you, Alan, when they saw that Canadian flag on my coat, they were bawling. I was never prouder to be Canadian in my entire life. They had no use for the Australians. They tolerated the Americans. When people see our flag in Europe, anywhere in the world, because we have such a high Ukrainian Canadian population here, a lot of them had relatives in Manitoba, Alberta, out west. They were on their hands and knees crying with gratitude. There's some things I did I'm not going to talk about. I'm not at liberty.
Yeah.
But insofar as the humanitarian stuff goes, Dnipro was the worst thing I ever saw in my life. I had to see a therapist when I got home. They destroyed a building full of families, killed women and children. And myself and Ben Dusing, a lawyer from Kentucky, went the next day. We were the only foreign volunteers who showed up to help.
Yeah.
And Ben went to talk to the guy in charge, and I crossed the road to where they were clearing the rubble, and for the rest of my life, I wish I hadn't done it. I was helping to clear rubble. The corpse-sniffing dog came over, and they pulled out 2 children in their pajamas. And I'm never going to forget it as long as I live.
Life-changing experience, sounds like.
The whole thing was a life-changing experience. You got to understand something. Due to something that happened in my personal life, which was dead wrong, I had PTSD before I left. The irony is that a war-torn country took my PTSD away. And I have bombs blowing up within 200-300 yards of me constantly. Air raids 24/7. I was at the front 4 times. And don't ask me why. The courage of the people there is unbelievable. Maybe it was infectious. Maybe it was growing up here in World War II stories from my uncles, my grandparents, people who were there. You know, people in my family who were heroes during World War II, telling us stories. And it's exactly what the place reminded me of. All the stories I heard growing up about the Battle of the Bulge, you name it, Normandy. It's World War I in the trenches, World War II with the tanks, and World War III with the drones. And the people are paying. But that motherfucker, Putin, I got a $50 bet going with a friend of mine that he's going to be assassinated by the fall. He's pulling 17-year-old kids out of the trenches. James Chalice is finding 17-year-old Russian boys crying, sitting on their guns in trenches, begging not to be shot. They can get rid of Putin, they can get rid of the guy from the Wagner group, the guy who's second in command, but it's going to take Russia 50 years to make up, even begin to make up for what they've done. And it's going to cost them $1 trillion in reparation payments to Ukraine because the country's been leveled.
Yeah.
Other than Lviv and Kyiv and Kherson, Kharkiv, the country has been leveled, just leveled. You've never seen anything like it in your life.
See, I like this input because, I mean, everybody you talk to has some kind of opinion about it, but do you have a first-hand?
I did podcasts with Ben Dusing every day.
Yeah.
I sent video back. You know, CBC and CTV and Global never had their asses up at the front.
No.
And then finally, see, they could have done a satellite interview with me and saved the taxpayers a fortune when I was there. And I would have done it. Not for me, for the Ukrainian people, because I went there to raise awareness, money, and help them.
Yeah.
And then a couple of weeks ago, I see one of their reporters is in Bakhmut for 10 minutes inside a tank. God knows how much it costs to send the reporter, and I know for a fact from James Chalice that the reporter was there for 10 minutes. In, out. How much did that cost?
And how long were you there?
3 months and 2 weeks. 14 weeks.
That's a long time to be away from home for anything.
When you're there, the days are like that because you're in the middle of a war zone. Every day is the longest day. You got to strap on a 150-pound vest every day. And let me tell you something, I was the oldest volunteer in the country. You think strapping that thing on every morning wasn't chore enough? Try walking around with it for 12 hours. I lost 25 pounds, and I don't intend to gain it back. I'm in pretty good shape right now from carrying that thing around.
And did you go over with any preconceived notions that you found out were totally wrong when you got over there, when you saw firsthand what was going on?
Nope. It was exactly what I expected. James Chalice was home seeing his kid and his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And his description of what was going on was exactly what I ran into. Danger, starvation, lack of medicine, no power, no water for people for months on end. And I guess the thing, it didn't surprise me because I'm from Canada, those 40 below nights where some guys died of exposure in the trenches, soldiers. They died of exposure. Anyway, there's things you can get there that you can't get here. The thing I loved most was, I'm in a war-torn country, but I can't get over the fact that cigarettes are $1.25 a pack. I'm tempted to take out citizenship in the middle of a war because I'm getting cigarettes for $18 less a pack than I'm paying at home. So there were Lucky Strikes, the most famous cigarettes of World War II. Best cigarette I've ever had in my life. I couldn't do this on regular TV. They could be cutting me off right here.
Yeah.
Best cigarette I've ever had in my life. And the night before I came home, I went and bought 64 packs. I put them in my carry-on. And I'm going, there has to be a way for me to sneak these in. I gotta be able to do it. So we land in Toronto. I'm in the lineup, 30 deep. Guy from Customs walks over and goes, "Hey Mike, how you doing?" I said, "Pretty good. What's your name?" He said, "Dave." He said, "Just getting back from Ukraine, we all followed your journey." I said, "Uh-huh." He goes, "Step out of line." So I stepped out of line, expecting to be in a room with a hand up my ass any second. And he said, "We want you to come to the front. We don't want you to wait in line." So I came to the front, and the lady on duty was Ukrainian Canadian. She goes, "Mike, how are you?" She said, "My grandparents and my parents are from Ukraine, and I want to thank you on behalf of my family for what you did." I said, "No problem." She said, "So," because I was sending pictures back of me smoking Lucky Strikes, talking about Lucky Strikes. "So, Mike, how many packs of Lucky Strikes are in your carry-on?" I said, 64 packs. And she looked at me and goes, "No duty." And she hands me a $25 Tim Hortons gift card that they all went in on. I never had an experience like that at Canadian Customs. So just before I walked away, I said, I could have brought back 2 pounds of hash, couldn't I? She says, "Yeah, you wouldn't have paid duty, but I would have taken a pound. You wouldn't have got it all." She was great. I never saw such a sense of humor on somebody at Customs. It was amazing.
That is pretty awesome.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Would you go back?
Nope.
No.
They want me to. I said, "I'm 65 years old. I busted my ass. I did my job.
Yeah.
The Army really wants me back. I can't get into it, but they want me to come back."
Yeah.
And I said, "Buddy, you can put 2 fucking Disney Worlds. You can put 4 fucking Disney Worlds in this country. I'm never setting foot in it again." But then one guy said to me, "Well, hang on a minute. As a thank you to people like you, when it's over, we might give you a villa at the Black Sea for a couple of weeks." I said, "Okay, if that happens, I'm in. But other than that, I'm not coming back."
Yeah.
What did I get out of it personally? Knowing what I'm capable of, knowing what I can handle. knowing that I have a semblance of the same bravery of my grandfather and my uncles.
Yeah.
That's a good feeling, because my generation has never been tested in any way, shape, or form,
Right.
other than playing high school football. So knowing that now is going to make me real comfortable in my own skin for the rest of my life. Helping the people was first and foremost the most amazing thing. And because of Ukraine, I got the love of my life. I realized I've never been in love. And she gave money for the kids for Christmas presents. She lives in Hamilton. And when I was in all these dangerous spots, she was worried sick about me. She kept sending me notes. And then she sent me one that said, I've had a crush on you since I was 17 years old, and I saw you at Yuckheads. So now I'm trying to figure out the math on her age, right? Because I don't date young women. Anyway, I just gave up on trying to figure out how old she was because she wouldn't tell me. And then 10 minutes after my plane landed, she phoned me and told me to come to Hamilton for dinner on Saturday night. And I did, and we've been together ever since, and I've been home 7 weeks. And I know we're going to be together forever. It's the greatest feeling I've ever had in my life. And it's the greatest feeling she's ever had in her life. So when you both feel the same way, don't do anything to fuck it up. That's my advice to you. You know, I should have known all my life. If they don't make your heart beat like a rabbit every time you pull in the driveway, don't bother. That's why I was never a fan of one-night stands. They're not worth it.
I'm glad you found that. That's awesome.
Took a long time. But the other issue is she's so gorgeous, I better keep myself in good shape for the next 10 years.
No pressure there, right?
I'm going to be the oldest guy getting a vasectomy next week at Oakville Hospital in the history of Oakville Hospital. So, the last thing I need, her kids are 5th generation twins. She's twin, her mother's twin, her grandparents are twins.
Right.
No thanks.
Yeah.
No thank you. So I'm going next week. I'm not happy about it. Got it? I'm not happy about it. I don't even like touching it. You know, let alone having some stranger in a mask do it. But, well, you got to do what you got to do.
If you don't mind, I'd like to veer back to the music thing. You said you don't know much about music, but were there any bands or artists that stood out to
Burton
you?
Cummings was the 3rd biggest thrill for me on the show. I have worshipped Burton Cummings his entire career. I've worshipped the Guess Who. I co-emceed the SARS concert with 500,000 people with Dan Aykroyd. And I did the daytime one because Aykroyd was too stunned to figure out that if you're doing stand-up, you want to do it before the crowd has heat stroke and they're hammered. So I did the early afternoon.
Excellent point.
And I got to introduce Guess Who, Rush, all the Canadian bands.
Jeff Healey.
Jeff Healey was fantastic. To me, I mean, they talked about AC/DC blowing the Stones off the stage. I thought Jeff and the Guess Who and Rush were the 3 best bands I saw that day.
Especially Rush being a Toronto band and Jeff Healey.
When Burton came on the show, we rented a beautiful grand piano for him, white one. He did 2 songs on the show. He did the whole show. The interviews were with him, and then he did 2 songs. And the thing that thrilled me most of all was after the show, he stayed for 90 minutes and did a concert for me and the crew and the studio audience.
Wow.
Like, who's going to do that? Who else would do that but Burton Cummings? To me, Billy Joel's not fit to carry Burton Cummings' luggage. I never understood why Burton solo didn't take off in the U.S. after the Guess Who,
Right.
the way he should have. But he did tell me that he made more money off of the American version of American Woman. You know,
the Lenny Kravitz?
Lenny
cover.
Kravitz,
Yeah.
who I had on the show when he did American Woman.
Yeah.
He did tell me that he made more money off Lenny Kravitz's version than he made off the Guess Who's version in 40 years,
That's
which
awesome.
was pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. You know, but his stories were incredible. His stories were incredible. A lot of the great musicians we had on told fantastic stories. I mean, we had the bands on from when I was a kid. We had a 70s week with April Wine, Chilliwack.
But they went right into the 80s too. All those guys.
They did, but we had a
started
70s week where we just had bands on that had #1 hits in Canada in the 70s. And it was a most thrilling week for me. I mean, it was amazing to have them all on, you know. To have John Chrétien on when he was sitting Prime Minister. It was unheard of to be on an entertainment show when you were sitting Prime Minister. That was a huge thrill, and until you meet him in person, you don't realize how charismatic he is and how he held sway over the entire party.
Right.
The guy is charisma plus in person. You know, I realized how powerful he was when I met him. You know, it was just amazing to me.
Yeah.
And I got him because he asked me to host a Confederation dinner. I said, yeah, I'll host a Confederation dinner if you come on my show. If you don't come on my show, I'm not doing the Confederation dinner. And he was one of those guys you could talk to that way. You know? And didn't ask you to call him Mr. Prime Minister. When I hosted the Confederation dinner afterwards, he said, call me John. I mean, it's pretty thrilling.
It is.
I can't imagine Justin Trudeau saying it. Call me Justin. You know? And those were good times in the country, too.
Yeah, they were.
The years I was on, 97 to 2004, were probably the best years in our economy. Then you had Clinton for a while, and then you had Chrétien the rest of the time, and it was amazing. It was an amazing time to be alive. It was an amazing time to be on Canadian television. It was an amazing time to promote Canadian talent.
And you had one of the best musicians I think I've ever seen as your house band.
As my which?
Orrin Isaacs.
Orrin Isaacs.
Like, just a phenomenal musician and a talent.
Still composing for Canadian television. Incredible co-host. Amazing human being. Orrin never failed me once, neither did the other guys in the band. Wilson, Tony, and Mark never failed me. Even when we put them in comedy sketches, they never failed us. And Orrin was virtually my lifeline every single night of the week. I hope he sees this.
I still have his CD. I remember buying his CD off him at the show one night, and he autographed it for me, and he was so excited.
Great human being.
It's an excellent CD.
You got to understand too, when this happened, it was probably the only late night talk show in history that had a majority black band.
Yeah.
You know? I mean, Marcellus was Leno's first band leader, but he quit after like 6 months.
Yeah.
But other than that, he would have been the first black band leader on the show. But our band was majority black.
Yeah.
And that was a first. And him and I lived half a kilometer apart when we both bought houses after the show took off.
Yeah.
And sometimes we drove in together. But every Tuesday night, I demanded that him and I go out for dinner and go to a movie together. And he agreed. And our wives agreed, because I said, it's very important that we not fake a friendship here.
Exactly.
So when he came, the first day I met him, the producer said, we know a guy who should be the band leader.
Yeah.
So I was in the room with Rob and Greg and Sean. We were trying to come up with the show, and Lawrence. We were trying to come up with the concept of the show. So one of the producers said, he's going to be here in an hour. He'll knock on the door. Just let him in. I said, okay. So we were in the conference room. So I see this huge shadow, because he's a big guy. There's a knock on the door. And I open the door, and I go, not black enough, and I slam the door in his face. And he falls down on the floor laughing. So I opened the door. I said, I don't even care if you can play the fucking bass. You're the band leader. And he came in and hit it off with everybody.
And he turns out to be one of the best bass players I've ever seen, anyway.
And Tweedy, Sean Tweedy, used to say intentionally racist stuff to him after the show and stuff. And Orrin would never get mad. But I said to him, one of these days, one of these days he's not going to be in the mood, Sean. And you wait and see what happens. So we all went out for dinner, and Sean made some comment that he thought was funny. And Orrin picked him up and snapped him over his back like a twig. And he's laying on the ground crying. And I said, you know what, call a cab. I don't know how you get no. You're not coming with me. You're not coming with Orrin. Mark and Wilson have no interest in you now. Get home any way you can. And we left him on the street. And Orrin and I went home together. We could have given him a ride. He lived not far from me, but we just left him there.
Do you still keep in touch with a lot of the guys from the show?
Some. But Paul Schaefer came on the show. and he said to Orrin, "How close are you and Mike?" And Orrin told him. I mean, our dressing rooms had one door between us, and it was open all the time.
Yeah.
We were goofing off all day long together. And Paul Schaefer said, "You're the luckiest man on television." He said, "Dave and I haven't spent more than 5 minutes together in 15 years." He said, "Dave and I started like you and Mike, but then..."
Yeah.
He said, "Dave became so insular that I'm not even friends with him anymore."
Wow.
And I said to Orrin that night, "See, that's what I'm talking about. You can't have that. You know, you can't have that happen."
Yeah.
I said, "You can't be the co-host and the band leader and us not be friends."
You can't fake it.
People pick up on it, especially in Canada. You gotta remember something. Canadian audiences are harder to please than American audiences,
Yeah.
but that's because they're smarter than American audiences.
Right.
I've played American clubs. It's like taking candy from a baby. American comics who have somewhat of a good name down in the US come here, it ain't so easy. If you start out in this country and you move there, there's a reason a lot of guys went there and became huge stars. Because they were playing in front of the toughest audiences on the face of the earth. Not that they're not kind and giving, they are, when it's good.
Yeah.
It's amazing to me how Canadian audiences can pick up on a hack or a joke thief, and I'm proud of that fact. It makes me proud to be Canadian. You know? Pretty amazing.
It is. I can't thank you enough for sitting down and talking to me, Mike.
Well, I didn't really talk to you, Alan. I talked at you. Nobody can see you. For all we know, you've dubbed this. It was just me nattering on to myself.
Look, I don't
for an
even
hour.
know how to edit, Mike. I wouldn't be smart enough to dub it, so...
You know, I had an editor who did edit, but wasn't smart enough to do it, so I understand completely.
I like the raw footage. I like seeing, you know,
Raw's the most appealing thing in the world to me. It's
because you're
most
going to get the
real.
real answers
Yeah.
out of someone. I don't like the way you can edit and
And
make
by
it
the
look-
way, like a lot of people, I had grown critical of our country and was getting tired of things. Now, there's some things I'm still tired of. But when I got back here, I realized we're the luckiest people on the face of the earth. Fuck America.
Yeah.
We're the luckiest people on the face of the earth. To be born in this country is a lottery win, in spite of the bullshit price of gas. By the way, while I was gone, Dollarama became $8. I don't know what the hell happened to the prices of everything while I was gone. It was shocking when I got back.
Yeah.
But my girlfriend, Lisa, lives 8 kilometers from Caledonia, 6 Nations. So now I'm getting all my cigarettes and gas there, so I'm not bitching about the price of gas and cigarettes. I'm pretty happy. Pretty happy.
Hey, you find a solution, right?
Got to. Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Mike, for sitting down and doing this. I
Hey,
really
buddy, thanks
appreciate
for
it.
coming, and thanks for buying me lunch, which no one saw you do.
No problem. Thanks.
All right.
Take care, man.
All right, you too.